That was the longest we've ever had. Hi, and welcome back to Thursday Night Live, where we talk and chat with interesting people doing interesting things. And tonight's guest is definitely no different than that. Another wonderful guest that has been brought to us by the wonderful Lisa Browning, who is connected to so many great people. So Clay Williams, quite a few years ago, started what was called the Canal Pursuit. And the Canal Pursuit was to bring awareness, raise money, and also to get some runners out there to work on mental health, to promote mental health, to let people be aware of it, and also raise some money for mental health. And the run actually goes through our little town and goes all the way to Ottawa. Now, as I understand, people don't run that whole way. It's pretty far. I know I can't run that far. So they do it in stints of 10 to 20 kilometers. And that way you get a lot of participants. And I understand there's also a wonderful Canadian flag that we'll see later. He also was part of the Monarch Ultra race, which runs again from Peterborough all the way to Mexico. He was kind of integral to the first one. I believe he mapped out the race of the very first Monarch Ultra. Since he has kind of moved on to other passions. But, you know, it's really interesting to me, who is a budding runner. I've been running for a year, and, you know, I've now conquered the 22 kilometers. Now I'm starting to talk to people who run hundreds of kilometers. And Clay Williams is one of those people that I'm just like, I get 22, but 100, as Pat always tells me, I think they invented a car. So
he's stealing my jokes already. Like we're not even 2 minutes into this, and stealing my jokes.
Stealing it already. Terrible. So Clay Williams, so we talk a lot on Soaring Profits about motivation and what motivates us to do things. Like, obviously you felt there was a need, you felt there was a hole in society, and you wanted to fill that gap. Why a race? Why the ultra? What brought you to put all of those things together into a concise unit that you know promotes mental health?
The answer to that is quite a long and involved one. It wasn't a one-step decision to do this run for mental health. I was first of all a runner, and then a mental health advocate. So back in 2005, I ran my first marathon and crossed the finish line, and it was transcendental. This doing this marathon was amazing. I'm an engineer, and we had a training plan, we had a race plan, executed, and got the result that was predicted, and that's perfection, right? So and it was really hard and physically challenging, and I wasn't sure how much my body could take. So what was I capable of? At that time I was 45 years old. Can I do more? And I'd heard about longer runs, these ultras. So I ran an ultra, and when I ran that first marathon, I had signed up online and clicked a button to raise funds for the associated charity. And it was something that I had no connection with, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and raised $500 for a charity by sending out a few emails. And I thought that was
this is easy. We can do this.
Exactly. That was pretty awesome. How can I do more? How can I make that better? So the next year I ran the Great Wall Marathon in China and raised more money for the Arthritis Society. And I've got arthritis. So each year after that, I would try to run a longer run or a more difficult run, and connect my run to a charity. So I did runs for Habitat for Humanity and the Diabetes Canadian Diabetes Association and a few other charities. In 2014. I did really well in a 48-hour race. I finished as first place male. I've got the medallion over here. And I'm a back of the pack runner. So the only reason I finished as first place male is in 48 hours, I only slept, I think 3 little 20-minute naps, and all the other competitors would sleep for 4 hours each night. So I was like the tortoise and the hare thing, right?
Right.
So I was bragging to a buddy that I'd finished first place, and he said, "My wife just said you should run across Canada." And I thought, well, I've kind of already thought that, but I don't have enough vacation time. So, but the point of that is, I was looking for what is there that's another challenge that's maybe longer than 48 hours, and so that was 2014, and I heard that this race director who organizes a race called Beast of Burden in Buffalo. So it's in upstate New York, and there's a summer version and a winter version, and they had organized a race from, I think it was Rochester, along the Erie Canal all the way to Buffalo, 600 some kilometers. And a friend of mine registered for it, so no peer pressure or anything. So I thought I had to register for that, and I'll do a fundraiser for. What should I do? That was a summer that Robin Williams died by suicide. There was a bunch of social media mainstream media coverage about our first responders and military struggling with PTSD and high suicide rates. And 2 of my older brothers had died by suicide. My wife, my daughter, my oldest sister all struggle with depression. So mental health. I've got to do this run for mental health. So taking kind of a step back from that, even at that stage, the main motivation was to do a run, to do the interesting run, to do the big project or the big challenge. It wasn't mental health advocacy. The mental health advocacy was when I run for a charity or for a cause, or up until that time, when I would do that, it would add a little bit more accountability to my run. So it would help me with my training. And on these days, like this morning when there was 4 inches of snow outside, if I don't have a little bit of outward accountability, or with that outward accountability, it makes it a little easier to lace up my shoes and go out for a run when I otherwise just want to stay in bed, right? So, so I was going to do this run for mental health along the Erie Canal, and so I connected with the Mood Disorder Society of Canada, with whom I'm still connected. So I've been raising funds for them for all of these years, nine years coming up now, over $100,000 through the years. But that aside, I connected with them, and we started an awareness campaign through the autumn. And I started training. I recruited a crew to come and help me. It was going to be the last week of August. I was going to have 4 people come out and support, and I got a few pace runners set up. And then in January of 2015, before this race was supposed to start, the race director canceled it. Not enough people had signed up for it. So I had I was all dressed up but with no place to go, right? So I thought, I've got this thing on the go. I've got people committed. There's not another race that's going to be a week long in that time slot in 2015 that I'm going to be able to jump on. So I have to make my own course. So I got on Google Maps and did a few Google searches and what is there for canals in Canada. Maybe I'll just stay in Canada instead of US, and found the Trent Severn and Rideau canals. I did a quick Google Map sort of thing along, and that's going to be about 850 kilometers. Ooh, that's quite a bit more than I was looking at before. I can probably do it. So I spent a bunch of time finding the shortest route on foot from lock to lock along the Trent Severn Canal from Port Severn on Georgian Bay down to Trenton and then across to Kingston. and then along the Rideau Canal, lock to lock, on some ATV trails and local footpaths, and a little bit of bushwhacking, and set up this. The original course was 785 kilometers, and had a support crew. And the first year, 2015, I ran the full thing myself. So I ran. The plan was to run 100 kilometers a day, and for the first, I think the first 5 days, I did that. Then I had an injury, and kind of a setback, and did a little gap. So the section between Trenton and Kingston, where there isn't a canal, I was in the RV to Kingston because I had this long break. I had this in my mind. I need to get to Ottawa at 4:30 on Saturday afternoon. That's my target.
You didn't miss much anyways. There's not much down there to see.
No,
you're good.
No, it was dark by the time I got there. A little bit late. I think it was around 9:30 at night or something. And there were like 10,000 people on Parliament Hill watching the light and sound show. They weren't there for me.
Oh.
No, I would have lied in that case. I would have lied in that case.
Like, they're all here. Woo! Is there a brief second you came over the hill and you're like,
oh yeah, look at the lights. What? There's cameras.
Just start shaking everybody's hands. Hey, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, obviously it sounds like, as a true engineer, necessity is the mother of invention. And it sounds like you found a problem and you solved said problem. Now, I am not so much of a runner. James is our, in-house celebrity runner, if you will. Why? Why?
Yeah.
Like, why? When you wake up in the morning and I appreciate you, what drives someone to be like, 800 kilometers seems like a fitting afternoon?
Yeah, I went the engineering thing. So I ran my first 5K race in when was that? 2004. I think it was January of 2004, and crossed the finish line. And thought that was good. There's probably longer races than this. Maybe I'll find a longer race. So went through 8K, 10K. That's only 2 times 5K, right?
Yeah.
Half marathon is 21K. That's only 2 times 10K. Full marathon, 2 times half marathon.
Yep.
Ultra, 50 kilometers. That's only a few kilometers more than 42. And then I went from 50K to 100 miles, which is 162 kilometers. So that's 3 times. So 3 is not much more than 2. And then from
the big bucks, Clay.
Yeah. And then from the 100 mile, I went to my next longer one was a 48-hour race. And I ran 225 kilometers. So 130, 140 some miles. And then, so when I was looking at this canal pursuit, all along there, I was thinking, I didn't die during that. I didn't have any major like overuse injury. There wasn't. My knees didn't blow out like everyone said my knees would do when I run too much. But I found some parts of me, I guess, that I couldn't experience anywhere else. I would get to a place where everything in my body was saying, see that tree over there, you should curl up against that tree and go to sleep. But there was something at that finish line that kind of attracted me, and I wanted to see how much I could push this machine that I abused for so many years. If I treat it nice, how will it respond? Right. So there's always been that kind of curiosity. How far really can I go before I'm at the finish line? And like that, I've never been like the guy at the finish line whose knees buckle and has to crawl to the finish line. I've always had a little bit left. Maybe that means I'm not pushing hard enough, but my body hasn't let me down yet, and I think I'm still looking for the big long challenge. That's one of the things. So going a little further along, I ran the first year, the first year of the Canal Pursuit, I ran the full distance myself. Although I ran the full distance, I always had a pacer with me, and it was far from an individual effort.
Yeah.
In a situation like that, I found anything over, say, 50 or 60 kilometers, it really helps if I've got a crew and they know what my plan is, because by the time I'm at 50, 60 kilometers, a lot of my marbles aren't with me anymore.
Yeah.
And if I've made decisions, or all the plans of nutrition, hydration, all of that stuff, and some of the what if plans, if my crew knows what those are, then I don't have to make those decisions. They can help me. You said you were going to do this. Oh, I don't remember that, but okay, I'll do that.
Like, just for us lay people or normies out there that drive cars this distance, what is a pacer?
Oh, yeah, good question. It's a little bit of a misnomer. So I guess for the competitive marathon runners, the 3 or 4% that are at the front of the group, a pacer maintains their race pace so that they can finish in a good time. Typically in an ultra, usually 100 miles or longer, the race directors will allow the runner to have company. So it's a person who runs along, or in a lot of cases later on in the race walks along with the runner, to make sure if they fall down they get up. Make sure if they for me running along the canal, to make sure I didn't fall in the canal and drown, or fall in the ditch and I've fallen and I can't get up.
Probably also to remind you to eat and drink.
Yes.
And because I know, so I haven't done those crazy, but I've done 24, and there's been times when like I'm down to the 20 and I forget that I'm supposed to have a drink, or I'm supposed to eat, because I'm just like, my brain, everything has narrowed down. Everything has become like this vision that you're looking through, and you just kind of forget what's going on around you. So when someone with you and they're like, you should maybe have a drink, then you do it, right? Because everything starts becoming automatic. I couldn't imagine 50. One of the things you talked about, I was just talking to a girl that I know very well today about it, and we were talking about, she was asking me, how do you run? How do you, work out? How do you lose that weight? And I said, well, the biggest thing that you can do for yourself is pick a goal. So like if you want to run a 5K, 2 months from now, sign up for a 5K. In her case, she's going to do a Tough Mudder, which fits what she's looking forward to do. And I said, now you just got to get the skills to that. And as long as you have that goal in front of you, you're going to do it because you want to do it. It's like you said that, you want to, like I started with a 5K too. And I wouldn't give up because I had to get that 5K speed, I had to get that 5K race. And then once I crossed the finish line, I'm like, that wasn't so bad. I could probably do 10. 10's only twice that. And now I'm going on to the Chile run, which is the 22 for the same reason. Like you said, well, I did 10, 22 is only double that. So that shouldn't be bad. But really, like you said, you set those goals for yourself. You put yourself accountable. You paid for something, or you said to people that, you know what, I'm going to raise money for you. And so do you think that was a big part of your motivation, or do you think it was more that personal drive that you just want to push yourself? Like which do you think had a bigger influence on your running?
I think early on it was, I didn't want to let the people down who were supporting me. So, and that, I guess that's fear of failure, right? So I never made a plan B. There wasn't, if I don't cross the finish line before the cutoff, then I will plan B. There's that. seldom made a plan B, and that kind of carried on into the Monarch Ultra and into later on. For example, I did a 200-mile race in a local park. During the pandemic, I couldn't go to New Jersey where the race was, so
Right.
I got some friends to help me out in a local park. It was a 1 mile loop at the race in New Jersey, so we set up a local 1 mile loop, and it wasn't for a fundraiser. I just wanted to get this. It was like a bucket list thing, right? I wanted to get this 200-mile thing done, and there wasn't an alternative. The 48-hour race, I ran that same race. It was called Dirty Girls. I ran that same race 3 years in a row. The first year, I had a backup plan. If I ran for the runners who ran more than 100 miles, they would get a belt buckle.
Right.
And for the runners who ran 200 kilometers, they would get a bigger belt buckle. So my goal was to run 201 kilometers because I wanted the bigger belt buckle.
Right.
So I made a plan to run 240, and as a backup, I have to run at least 201 kilometers. So I ran 201 and quit with 4 hours left in the race. Right. So I had that secondary plan. And the next year, and it really bothered me because if I had kept going, I looked back at the race results about 4 days later. I was in 4th place. And if I had done another full lap, which was 8 kilometers, I would have had a podium finish. I had never had a podium finish. So that kind of fueled me on for the next year. I really want to get on a podium. I've never been on a podium.
Right.
This is a little race. Maybe I can do that. So the next year I finished as 2nd place male.
Wow.
So the next year, there's only one place to go from there, right?
Yeah.
So I trained a little harder and finished as 1st place male the next year.
So 208 kilometers. What kind of speed do you have to pull? So like if I do 10, I'm about 6 minutes, 30 seconds a kilometer.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're not doing that speed, doing 200 kilometers.
No,
so
definitely not.
Talking about?
Yeah, I try not to wear a watch. No, I'm joking. Pretty slow. So I'm training right now for a 100-miler at the end of July,
Right.
and I know I'll need to be around an average of 8.5 minutes per kilometer average. That's including stop time and everything.
Yeah.
So aid station time and the whole thing. So it's not very fast. I'm training at around 7 minutes, 6.5 and 7 minutes per kilometer for 20K runs, but that's not sustainable for over 160 kilometers for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely for 20K 7 you can pull
Mm-hmm.
out. So I was talking to Janelle. We were talking before that Janelle and I were chatting during my run tonight, and she was saying that sometimes it's about you do a little bit faster speed and then you do a little bit of walking.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's how she kind of does it, because she does the same. She does. I think she's going to do the foxtail very soon. This summer, I think. Which I believe is 100K, and I'm like, I don't even how. But she talked about that. She said that like you do run, and then you may walk a little bit, and then. But what I found interesting is that you kind of store bags along the route.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
So with Canal Pursuit is kind of a point-to-point thing, and it's not really a race. It's a relay run. It's a fun run. Let's say a 780 kilometer fun run.
Pat's gonna do
it. So if you're for a lot of the 100-mile races, you can pack and leave a drop bag at aid stations. So you take a look at the course and determine the distance and estimate the time you're going to be at each of the aid stations, and try to cipher what you're going to need at that aid station that they aren't going to be providing. You'll be able to get water and some basic food at the aid station, but you may need a change of clothes or a little heavier jacket if it's you're going to be at that aid station at dusk or that kind of thing. So you can pre-pack and have these drop bags at each of the aid stations, and stop in at the aid station, do your thing with whatever you need with the drop bag, and leave it there and continue on. And at the end of the race, they're all collected and brought back to the start finish, and you can grab your bags again.
So Clay, that you put some water in it or some salt tabs or like, some of the sugar.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was going with the Clay. Is that obviously for me, you guys are insane. I appreciate you though. I think it's wild. But the average person, what are you packing in this process? Like, are you sitting there? And I remember I'm old enough to remember like the tea gel carbohydrates that you just slurp and for that quick energy pickup. Is that something people are still doing? Is this?
Yeah.
So
So
off this for the majority of a couple of days while they're running.
Yeah, some people do. So there's I know a few people with dietary restrictions and have a real challenge getting enough calories in.
Right.
For me, I can't. I just can't stomach the gels anymore. They're just not palatable to me anymore.
Yeah.
They're super sweet and they just don't go down. I use them for quite a long time and they're an awesome quick energy source. I use now for my long events just straight up maltodextrin. So it's basically like cornstarch.
Yeah.
A little bit more. I think it's a little bit more of a simple sugar. So one step down from cornstarch, but it's fine white powder and it's soluble in water. It's tasteless and odorless. So I mix it mix it in my water bottles, put a little bit of Gatorade just so it's got a little bit of flavor, and that's most of my calories. It's simpler for my brain to have the basic components. So I've got my carbohydrates. I had some advice from a dietitian and a triathlon coach about when to take in proteins and fats during a multi-day effort, and how much to take at a time, and that sort of thing. So I plan out the
what kind of things did they say?
Like,
obviously, that type of information, if you can hone that in with some of the body, chemistry for yourself, everyone's probably a little bit different and your exertion levels. But what kind of advice did they give you in that process?
That's that's magical. That's the sorcery that a lot of people miss when they get into running.
Right.
So I also there's a few things I learned from that exchange. He measured my perspiration rate, and from that, and perspiration rate and electrolytes in my perspiration. The result of that is I know how much water to drink and how many electrolytes to take in certain conditions, if it's really hot or if it's not hot. So I found I was drinking twice as much water as I needed and way too many electrolytes. So I was retaining water and actually gaining weight on that while I was running. So I cut that way down. There's an average of, I think it's 60 grams an hour of carbohydrates that a person's stomach can metabolize and put into your bloodstream. If you consume more than that, it turns into steaming compost, I guess. It causes some stomach troubles.
Yeah.
Well, the cool thing though, I mean, I learned also that he said an average person, it's 1 gram per minute, 60 grams per hour of carbohydrates, but you can train that upward. Oh. And I thought, well, how do you train muscles? You work them until they're sore and injured, and then they recover a little bit stronger. So how do you train up consumption? Do you just eat until you're sick? And I'm not sure. But anyway, I found after a while that my numbers around 72 grams per hour, and that's still not enough that's still not as many calories as you consume, or as I consumed in any case. My first run to Ottawa, not as many calories as I burn. My first run to Ottawa, I weighed myself every 12 hours to make sure I wasn't crazy dehydrated and losing a bunch of weight or something. And I maintained my weight for the entire event. I didn't lose any weight, but I think my muscles must have been swelling or retaining water from overuse injury. You know, you're kind of swollen after exertion, right? In the week following the event, I lost 12 pounds, and I ate everything I could. Afterwards, yeah. So I think as my body was healing up, as my muscles were losing all of that water and healing up, I lost that weight.
So what does that look like afterwards? So you do the run, you finish, you end up first on the podium, because that's now that is what we expect from Clay Williams now after that.
Right there. First. Yeah. So, either that or 20,000 people are watching him and a laser show.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Trudeau over the hill.
Yeah.
But now after you come down, obviously you've done a number on your body. You're saying that you added weight, then lost weight. That kind of fluctuation in weight can't be healthy for somebody. What do you do? How do you repair yourself afterwards? What's your routine? Obviously, like physio, massage, that sort of stuff. What do you add in there to make sure that you're ready to go the next time?
Wishes and dreams, I guess. No. So magic. I've magic. That's the magic of the advice from the nutritionist. I think nothing really special. I don't think. There's some recovery time. So after a big effort like that, if you use the advice of a Garmin device, it's something like a day's rest for every mile that you've raced hard. So 40 days rest or 26 days rest after a marathon. If I'd done that after the first Canal Pursuit, I'd be like a year of not running, and I couldn't do that. I actually, the section that I said I left out between Trenton and Kingston, 6 weeks later, I went back and ran that section because I had to carry that flag in that section.
Right.
And I remember at 30 kilometers thinking, holy crap, this feels like 100 kilometers already. I was really beat up. So it's just reduced exertion. Just make sure your diet's clean. It's really tempting to eat all the stuff. Your body wants all the protein and fat and sugar, right? Chinese takeout is awesome. One meal is fine. But not too many.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. Like I haven't done the big runs that you've done, but I do remember after doing my 5 and my 10, there was a recovery period that I didn't understand. Like after my 5, I seriously hurt myself because one, I did 5 at a very fast pace and I was pretty excited about it. So immediately after that week, I kept running at that speed, which is crazy. I didn't have someone, I should have asked someone. I could have asked someone, but I didn't. So for the next 10 days, I ran at that speed. And by day 9, I think, I felt something go in my hip. And I was like, oh. And then I could not run for about 2 months. Not even a little bit. So there's like definitely you have to take that time to slow down. You don't necessarily need to stop though.
No.
But you do need to do a lesser workout for a while.
Yeah, I've got a monthly appointment with my chiropractor. So I've got arthritis in my fingers and toes and my lower back. So I've got to be really conscious of my posture. Later on in the run, there's a tendency to kind of lean forward and have your glutes do a little bit less work because they're stretched out, right? And that's just brutal for me. So I've got to be conscious of my posture. So I've got a chiropractor monthly and a massage therapist monthly, and both of them are really sensitive to injury and want to keep me moving. So they're able to help me out for the normal little. And I'm 62 years old, right?
Wow.
So there's a few things I'm working against.
Well, so the research that I've done is that you can be like 70 something and still run. It's one of those things
for sure
that like you may not be able to lift weights, you may not be able to like play hockey, you may not be able to do but with running, you tend to get better.
Yeah,
As you
yeah.
grow. And,
Yep.
you know, even at 60 and at 70, if you keep on running and you keep on doing the right things, you actually can improve upon your running.
Yep.
Whereas
Yeah, I read a
one of
book
those
on
silly sports, right?
Yep. Read a book on masters running, and it was a study done starting in the early 70s. And there were, I think, a couple dozen people that were tested every decade up until the early 2000s. And they were all runners. And the moral of the story, or the basically the finding of the book, was regardless of what age you start running at, with proper training, you can improve for 10 years. So that told me, it's starting running at 43 years old, that for 10 years, my rate of improvement could be better than my rate of decline from age.
Yeah.
So now, Clay, when you look at something like that, are you looking at like an exponential growth over 10 years, or is it more like a linear type kind of?
No, I think I think it was just staying ahead of the aging process.
Okay.
And I started at a pretty low fitness level. I started running with a buddy just before that first 5K. We would put our shoes on, a coworker, we'd put our shoes on at the end of the day and do a lap around the industrial complex where we worked, because it bothered me that I would be winded after climbing up a flight of stairs. So I just wanted to do the kind of get in shape thing, right?
And this was
Whatever
in your
that
40s,
meant.
sorry, Clay?
What's that?
This was in your 40s?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Were you athletic prior to?
Kind of on and off. I started, don't tell my mom, but I started smoking when I was 10 years old, and I smoked until I was 40. I did a little bit of cross country running when I was in high school, because there was a girl I really liked who was on the cross country team.
This is a common thread.
Yeah.
Always the girl.
So, but I think I ran 3 or 4 races. I came in last in every one, and my heart just wasn't in it. I wasn't there for the running. Yeah, that's it.
Well, it was a cigarette hanging at the lip and the pack rolled up in the sleeve.
Yeah. There were these cross country races, and I would get lost and stop and have a smoke. And but
you couldn't keep up with the girl anyway, so why bother?
No, that's right. And I forget where we were going with that.
Well, no. So again, myself,
I started with racing. Like, so for me, it was I lost a bunch of weight. I did a bunch of, like, I did CrossFit, I did yoga, I did a whole bunch of things, and then there was this girl, and she taught me how to race, how to run, and then from there, I just loved running. It's like one of those things that, like you said, like tonight I went running. And it's awful out. Like one of the girls said, it's like running in mashed potatoes, and she's not wrong. Yeah. It was literally like running across mashed potatoes, and we did it was 10K this evening at a fair pace. But I wouldn't change a thing. I love it. It's just a fun passion that I found, and so I get it. Pat doesn't so much.
No.
So when you started running, because you started running by running around the complex, you said. Was it immediately, I love it, or was it a daily struggle, or like what kind of motivation did you draw there?
Initially, I really had to keep up with my running partner. He was 10 years younger than me, right? So it was important that I keep up with him. It was all ego right at the start.
Sure.
When we ran our first 5K race, that was pretty cool, and that kind of motivated me to look for the next thing. But what really motivated me was to keep up with it was I mentioned I've got arthritis in my fingers, and before I started running, my range of motion in my fingers was so bad I couldn't curl my fingers around a broom handle to hold a broom handle tight. So I had really limited range of motion. And I'm a handyman. I do my own automotive and have been renovating homes for years. And that kind of scared me that I wouldn't be able to hang on to tools anymore. After running almost every day for about 6 months, I noticed that I had full range of motion back in my fingers, and most of the arthritis pain was gone. And nothing really changed. My diet cleaned up a little bit, but not significantly. It was the exercise, the more circulation, moving of fluids around, whatever. But whatever it was, running got rid of my arthritis, and I stayed with running.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, have you looked into it? Have you read anything to see like why?
Let sleeping dogs lie.
Just let it go. Every miracle happened. I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Well, and a couple other things happened. So I was in the States, and I was in my early 40s, and testing for cholesterol was a thing, and my bad cholesterol level went way down. My resting, like I said, I'm 62. My resting heart rate is like 47. All the healthy things that come out of doing something consistently for a while. The arthritis has started to creep back. I mean, I started running. That was 18 years ago already. I'm getting old. Anyway, so with age, that's kind of coming back. So I've seen a natural path that's really helped me to clean up my diet. I'm now gluten-free and mostly dairy-free, but getting rid of gluten has really helped me a lot.
Help like your joint pain? Is that what you're talking about? Or yeah.
Like I would imagine, and again, I missed this day at med school, but like likely a lot of inflammation, right? Like when you take the inflammatory response out of the body, it's amazing what your body will do. So it sounds like you're dialed that in. Now, Clay, obviously, it sounds like very much you are a man of method. So you have a means to an end in a lot of these aspects. So first of all, it sounds like you started with, the arthritis, and then you jumped headlong into planning all of these aspects. Do you find that as kind of as a runner in these groups, that there is a professional group of people that are very like-minded in that aspect?
I think so. I think there's this ultra running community that I've kind of joined. I've got some really, really close friends who are ultra runners and have had pretty similar physical experiences, but also pretty similar emotional, let's say almost spiritual experiences as part of their runs. And each of them, I don't know if any, I do know one. I know one who's as meticulous in planning and numbers and so on as I am. A couple of them are, but I think a lot of them are kind of self-taught. So the people who have been running ultras for a few years. When I ran my first 100-miler in 2008, my first 100-mile attempt, there were no publicly available training plans for a 100-mile race. You could find a Couch to 5K training plan online. You could find marathon training plans online, but there wasn't anything published about ultras. So I had to basically take the plans that I had done and used from other people and found worked for marathons for me, and stretch that out to work for ultras. So I think a lot of people who've been running ultras for a few years didn't grab some information and advice in a package from someone, but have had to learn from their own mistakes or put pieces together themselves. And I think that's an awesome foundation, and definitely requires some dedication. There are a lot of things that can stop you from running. I know a lot of people who I talked to over the years have told me, I used to run, but I had this injury or this thing happen or that. So the few people that last into these long distances have overcome some obstacles and put together some self-made recipes, right?
Now, do you find that
there isn't a person that I've talked to who's a runner who hasn't had some sort of injury at some point. Like, I'm a young runner. I'm not young, right? I'm an old man, but I am new to running. I've been running for, I think, just over a year. I started when I was 51, 52 now, almost 53. Yeah, so I've even had an injury. It just seems to be a thing. And I think there are some people that an injury will stop them. And then there's a lot of people, because it's a community, and you I don't know, like there's a lot of support even when you're injured. Like they do, they reach out to you and ask you if you're running today and what's going on. Hey, why don't you just come out? You can walk while we and everyone seems to support each other, especially when someone's injured. It's a nice little nation. So my next question here, Clay, is what's next? Like, so you got another ultra coming up that you're planning, and that's going to be not Clay Williams running at all, I assume.
On which one?
The next Canal.
The Canal Pursuit.
Canal Pursuit. Sorry.
Yeah. So, the first, as I said, the first year I ran the full thing myself, about 100K days, so about 8 days of running. The second year, I ran the whole thing myself again, but only 60K a day for 13 days. So stretched it out longer, with a couple goals. And this is developing kind of a story. So I wanted to talk to more people. The first year I ran it, I had, let's see if I got my postcards. I had a handful of postcards, and they were a picture of the route that I was running and some contact information and how to donate to the charity. So every time I saw a person when I was running through all the towns, even Peterborough, I would approach them with a postcard and say, hey, I'm running to Ottawa for mental health. And I had, I don't know, probably 25 or 30 really heartfelt conversations with people. And far too many of them said, I lost a brother, sister, father, uncle to suicide. So the next year I wanted to talk to more people. I wanted to start those conversations because it was all about ending the stigma, right? And just getting conversations in people's faces. The more they hear about something, the less shy they're going to be to talk about it themselves, right? So I ran only in the daytime, which was awesome. I slept every night the second year, and did a couple public speaking gigs along the way. So I was able to talk to a couple hundred people during that second year. Then I thought, how can I get more people involved? Because there's not a lot of people who want to run 60K with me. How can I get people running shorter distances, so a way larger audience involved? So I created the relay along the same course, but broke it into 10K segments and invited people to run 10-kilometer combinations or multiples of 10-kilometer sections. So we started getting more people involved, and everyone who's involved shares on social media what they're doing and why they're doing it, right? So the reach has gotten so much bigger over the years, and we're into our 9th year in this coming summer.
So how do you build that brand? Obviously, it sounds like you've taken the mental health awareness aspect. I think it's fantastic. I think there's such a need for that type of awareness and just the direct conversation that's out there. But how do you create a brand? How do you create the awareness? What is your message to people other than, hi, I'm running because I think this is important? How do you get people to jump in on your cause?
A couple things. So I had a really good friend suggest for engagement, get people invested somehow, get them to sign a thing or carry a thing or bring a thing. So I bought this Canadian flag.
Full circle. Here we are. Yep. This is where we are.
Here's the flag. There's a picture of it on my Facebook page. It's a Canadian flag, and in the race season leading up to the first year that I ran the Canal Pursuit, I would always had this flag with me, and I would ask people, there's the flag, if you or someone you love is struggling with depression, anxiety, any mood disorder, please sign my flag. and I'll carry it the full distance of my run to Parliament Hill as a symbol that you don't have to carry your burdens alone. So that flag, I carried in my little backpack the first year, the full distance. And every year since then, I've had the honor of carrying that up onto Parliament Hill and unfurling it in front of the Centennial Flame. That year we were across the street because of protests, but that flag is kind of part of the brand. It's there's probably 300 signatures on it. Wow. It's there's a palpable feeling of responsibility when I've got that in my backpack and I'm on my way to Ottawa.
See, I love that.
Everyone who has signed it has a little investment in the run, and they'll remember the Canal Pursuit, right?
I love that, and I think that's such a fantastic way to, like, that is the grassroots motivation that we talk about all the time with people, is that you've brought your group of people together, literally, under the flag that the banner of that you folks are running under and for, and I don't think there's a better symbol out there for that. And that's that personal motivation driving facet. That's cool.
And also recently, sorry, I just want to get this in here. Also recently, you were asked to come to the Parliament itself for a very important discussion. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the Mood Disorder Society of Canada that I've been working with and supporting over the past few years, through the pandemic, wanted to get an idea of what the mental health organizations across the country were doing. So they sat down with nonprofits across the country, I think 49 or 50 of them, to find out what's working and what's not working, what their challenges are, what would you like from your community for support, what would you like from your government for support. And from all of those organizations, there were some really, really strong similarities in what their struggles were. So I was invited as part of a team of people to bring the results of those roundtable discussions to Parliament Hill prior to budget deliberations. So they were some suggestions on how the government could direct the money that they're going to be sending anyway. So it's not asking the government for more money. The money that they're going to be sending to the provinces for mental health services. It was really exciting. I mean, I've spoken in to small groups and a lot of people one-on-one. This was an opportunity to speak to ministers, members of Parliament in their private offices on Parliament Hill. Wow. About something that could really make a difference to the country. So I was one of, I think, about a dozen, and we were in teams of 3, and we spent the day on Parliament Hill. So each of us saw, I think, each of our teams saw 5 people. So we saw 15, 16 members of Parliament in this little blitz of awareness about this roundtable. It was pretty cool. Definitely out of my element.
And what did this study show? Like, what were the top few things that were recommended to the government to help mental health? Like, we talk a lot about mental health on Soaring Profits here because it's a huge issue right now. It's definitely affecting our homeless people. It's affecting people who are addicted to drugs. We've had guests on that talk about it. What are you finding are what have you found are the big things that are going to work, that are going to help kind of not solve the problem at all? You can't solve it.
Yeah.
Help it.
Yep. To help it. That's the key word. So I think the biggest, most significant one is providing consistent funding to organizations that provide mental health services. So there are a lot of small community-based organizations. Some are province-wide, some are just in communities that provide services. They rely on government funding, but they need to have a person searching for and writing grant applications, and that's almost a full-time job. So
Yeah.
if you're a small office of 5 or 6 counselors, you've got 15% of your person hours is spent looking for money. So if there could be a way to provide consistent financing, and the government's aware that these organizations that rely a lot on volunteers are an incredible payback. You pay for 1 person hour and you get 3 person hours because there's a lot of volunteer staff. So a big one of the strongest, or the first recommendation, was provide consistent and repeating. I can't think of the word right now, but consistent over a number of years, so that these mental health service providers can spend all of their time providing services and not looking for funding. A lot of cases, a community organization will look for grants and find one that's kind of close to what they do. And in order to successfully receive the grant, they have to change what they do to suit what the grant covers. And it's not their primary thing. So everyone's trying to wiggle into these little keyholes, right? Provide services to the guys who are good at what they already do, or so provide funding, right?
Yeah. So Clay, is this a situation where we're talking like large organizations like CMHA? CMHC is the mortgage. CMHA. Yes. Yeah. See, I'm the finance guy. I know the mortgage insurance organization. So CMHA, or are these, like, does each individual branch need to write these grants, or is this like a generic, we can do this as one bubble, we can apply for these grants? How does that
work? Yeah, I think each of the organizations, national, regional, or national, provincial, regional, all look for grants.
Now, does that seem redundant? Like, obviously, this is something
absolutely.
That right. See, and this is why I love talking with interesting people that have done these very cool things, is that you bring a flashlight to dark spaces in our society, right? This is something that we've been talking about. I don't know if you followed us during our little Path Tiny Homes community kind of push that we were trying to help with here locally. And the inefficiencies that are within our municipal systems, the inefficiencies in our provincial systems, the massive inefficiencies in our federal systems, right? And that's where it's like, I don't know how hard it would be to flush out some of these things if we have the community and social will to do it. What has your experience been with that?
Very little. I'm a runner, and I started this mental health advocacy a couple of years ago. Yeah, not very much. Honestly, my experience with mental health services, or let's say the mental health care system in Canada, has been all secondhand. Through conversations with people who are service providers and service recipients, and they all say it's broken. I prefer to take a more generous approach and say it's in its infancy. I think the understanding of mental health and the mental health needs is still pretty young. I mean, we can say 20 years or 25 years or whatever, but the government and medical systems are a pretty slow-moving bus. It takes a lot of rudder for a long time to make changes. So I think we're pretty early on in recognizing what's needed, right? That's still there are hospitals that have the physical healthcare, and then a completely separate thing called mental health care. When our bodies and minds are so
in unison,
integral to each other. So I think it's where it's just the pieces have to come together. And unfortunately, with the government, there has to be rules to protect everyone. So all of the bureaucracy, bureaucracy,
it's so difficult.
Blah 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 bureaucracy.
Exactly. Like they want to, one, not get in trouble by doing the wrong thing, but they also don't want to not cover everybody, and in
Mm-hmm.
doing so, they lose people.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that maybe we're in the infancy of mental health, but only because it keeps morphing. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
back
Yeah.
25 years ago when you're talking about, it probably was, you know, it definitely was for different reasons. Now it's a lot of it is anxiety and this whole loss of self and self-worth, and people really struggle with identity and stuff like that. Whereas before, I think it was a different kind of mental crisis, and not as widespread. I would argue that right now there are very few people that don't suffer some sort of form of mental health some point in their life at this juncture. Whereas in the past, I would argue that wasn't the case. I think that people lived lives, and they just, you know, went by and they didn't have it. It seems now, I don't know if it's.
I disagree.
You disagree?
I disagree. Yeah, I think so. I've I've got a parallel. So I work in manufacturing,
Right.
And been involved with a couple of companies that have started quality control systems. So there's this ISO system. I'm not sure if you've been involved in manufacturing at all. So when a company starts this this quality assurance system, they start tracking the errors and the defects, and they start to realize that 1.5% to 2.5% of their annual sales is stuff that gets turned into scrap. And this is terrible. And then they find out in the first year they've got 1%. They find out in the second year it's 1.5%, and then 2%, and then 2.25%. And they're not making more scrap. They're seeing more of the scrap that they're making, right? And I think with in the last 10 years or so, there's and this is just my opinion. I'm not a doctor. I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
This is what this is about. Don't worry about it.
But I think I have the feeling that some of the stigma around mental health issues is going away. More people are becoming less uncomfortable talking about it. So we're hearing about it from more people who would have 10, 15 years ago kept their mouth shut, sucked it up, and walked on, right? My oldest brother died by suicide in 1982. And he had attempted suicide when he was in high school. So 8 or 10 years prior to that. And I'm one of the boys in a family of 8 kids. And the only one other than my parents who knew about it was my oldest sister. So it was not something that anybody talked about.
Right.
So I think there were people that were struggling. PTSD used to be called shell shock. I think there were a lot of those things around. We just didn't have names for them, right? It's definitely a little different, and we're able to talk more in a little more detail about some of the smaller things, and it's okay to talk about those, and it's okay to bring them out into the light. Once you these conversations right here, like we're having, allows us to bring that out into the light, put a name on it, and then once it's got a name on it, once it's a thing that's out in the open, we can start to look at it a little differently, and maybe work on figuring out what it is exactly and how to help ourselves, right?
So what you're saying is you hypothesize that no, in fact, there's always been the same amount of mental health problems. It's just that 20, 25 years ago, less people talked about it because less people felt that they could talk about it.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah, well,
yeah, and a little different mentality.
I definitely say that's part of it, absolutely. But I also think that we're at a time that's different than any other time, where if you look at the younger population, there is more mental health problems. And I think it's very linked to identity and stuff like that. But I do agree that because we're talking about it more, because it's easier to talk about, it could be part of that too. But I really do think our young people.
So what do you think causes that, James? What do you think in society or in our world is putting those extra pressures? Or
Well,
is it the pressure?
what I'm thinking, like, what do I know? I don't know. Like Clay here.
You got a podcast.
I got a podcast, so I can talk about it, but I don't know.
Right.
No, I really do believe that, we're at a time when it's very hard to create an identity. Identity right now, a lot of times is like this social media and like they get to look at each other on Instagram. Well, Instagram isn't who people are, but it sure as hell looks like it from an outside source. So if you're constantly looking at all these people, they're having amazing lives, going skiing and laughing and having a good time, and you're not.
Mm-hmm.
It really seems to you that you're not having a good life.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was thinking it's a kind of a function of let's say Western society or modern civilization.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Clay, what do you think of organizations like, obviously, Bell has done some initiatives lately. I know there's a lot of people that are pro and very con. I don't know if you can tell the guy in the middle, he's got the head shake going on. There's a lot of people that are, very, supportive of what Bell was doing. Some people look at it as strictly a marketing campaign. Where do you kind of fall on that?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I haven't thought about it much. I've heard both sides, and I'm kind of on the fence on it. I mean, it's definitely a marketing thing.
Oh yeah.
It's marketing departments that support charities, right? In a lot of cases, but I think for some people, a lot of people see it differently and get some benefit from a little bit of relief, right? So it's not I don't think it's
I am kind of
I don't think it's all of one or all of the other.
Yeah, I am kind of joking a little bit. It frustrates me when companies come out and say they're doing something out of the goodness of their heart when really it's a marketing scheme, and that's what that whole Bell mental talk is. And they're playing it off like they're doing something good for people, which they are. So the fact that Bell Media Talks exists has been groundbreaking and earth-shattering, and has allowed men and children and women to come out and talk about their own personal mental health. And there's all like Facebook gets flooded with stories so that you feel comfortable telling your story, and all of that is wonderful. But then I think about how Bell gets to go, we're doing this for you, and they're not. So, but I think it's wonderful that they do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So Clay, what's next on the agenda? You got this run coming up. Any other trips to Ottawa in the near future? What's your work there?
No. That was kind of a one-time thing. The talks that it was supposed to influence are actually taking place next week, right? The Prime Minister is going to be meeting with the province about healthcare funding. So we'll see how that turns out. I'm happy. I'll send you my my PDF of my speaker one sheet. I'm happy to talk at people's functions and so on. But no, for the mental health advocacy, a few things, I guess. The Canal Pursuit. So the Canal Pursuit for the first few years was me running to Ottawa and asking people to donate money and having a lot of conversations. And I thought a couple of years ago, I'm kind of developing a brand here. Is there something more that we can do with this? So I started the People Talks with a little bit of extra effort and a little trial and error with, I think we used Instagram Live for the first one, and that was just terrible. But ended up doing recordings and putting it on YouTube. So I got a little camera skills, and then I mentioned I ran the 200 miler thing in my local park, and I wouldn't ask anyone else to do something that I haven't done yet. So I started a 72-hour annual autumn run that I host. And that's mostly a get-together thing for runners, and on the side, a fundraiser for mental health as well. I host a Valentine's trail run, and that's in February in the cold of winter when there used to be no races. Now there are races all year round. But I wanted to, again, a few years ago, wanted to see my friends in winter. So I said, hey, let's go for a run on Valentine's Day. So that's turned into an annual event as well. And I've started an audio-only podcast called The Pursuit. And it's just stories of adventures.
Cool.
And my next one is going to be my good friend Debbie, who's headed to climb Mount Everest in a couple months.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And where would someone go listen to those? Is it Spotify or?
It's on it's rss.com, Spotify.
That's what I heard. That's what I had listened to.
Yeah.
So I had listened to an interview that you had done with a young lady, and they were talking about, I think it was the setting up for the Monarch run, and that was pretty neat. That was very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, Clay, you know what? We're just over an hour here. It has been an absolute delight learning about your running, the great cause of mental health, which is near and dear to both of our hearts. And I think it's one of those things that we really do need to talk about more. And I know everyone has varying opinions, but at the end of the day, as long as we're there to be positive and help each other, that's pretty important. And the stuff that you've done over your life has literally changed people's worlds, whether it's been running beside them and hearing their story, which may not seem great, but every time someone gets to tell their story, they feel a little bit lighter, and they feel a little bit better, and they feel a little bit more heard. And you did that for a lot of people. And then on the other side, you've raised a lot of money for them, and now even starting to convince some people who have the purse strings how best to spend it. Clay, what an incredible life! What a incredible journey you've done from starting to just running around your plant to now changing the world, really changing the world. Clay, it's been such a pleasure. At this time, at the end of all our podcasts here, we have a sign off. So I talk a little bit, and then I do my sign off. Pat will talk, and he does his little inspirational sign off, and then we leave it to you, and you can say whatever you want, and then come up with a couple of words, words of advice, or maybe your own personal slogan, and that's kind of where we ended. But profiteers out there, thank you so much for joining us again. It always surprises me. It's always a wonderful thing when these Thursday nights we keep on meeting better and wonderful people that we have these great conversations and learn so much about. I hope you're enjoying them. I would like you to start commenting, letting us know what you like about it. Maybe there's people that you'd like to hear from, or even during our podcast, if you have questions, please throw them up and we'll get to answer them. Clay, you've been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. And I really appreciate you taking your Thursday night and giving it up to us. And such a pleasure to learn all the great things you're doing. Profiteers out there, let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls together.
Yeah, Clay, thank you again. I appreciate you joining us tonight. Very interesting process to see where you, like James said, running around the plant to then, planning a 4,000 kilometer monarch butterfly chasing adventure run. I think that's pretty cool. And even more so the story about how you got there, right? From in your early 40s to going like, I just don't feel like I can run up those stairs like I probably should be able to 2 hours a day. It's pretty admirable. And you can tell that there's a little bit of the engineering that comes out into your preparation and what you do. And I love it. I think it's fantastic. Folks, again, thanks for joining us. As always, Thursday Night Live. We're going to be doing some stuff here again this week in regards to the general market and personal finance. Everyone's talking about a stock market crash in the next days, if not weeks here, even more so than what we've been going through. So we've got some insight into that over the next few days and what that means for you and how it could be affecting you and your families. Clay, he's nodding over there. He knows what we're talking about. He keeps it on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as always, folks, let's make some money together. And Clay, this is where we stick you with the final words of wisdom. And what's your message?
A really simple one. If you're in a dark place, talk to someone you trust.
Nice.